Chapter 1058. In history, Ma Zhou had only become the head of the secretariat in the 18th year of Chang'an's reign. In other words, he was one of the prime ministers of the Tang dynasty. The current Ma Zhou was merely an insignificant imperial censor. He did not have any authority to speak of. In fact, Yan Liben, Lu Rengue, Shangguan Yi, and the other disciples were all like this. However, compared to the many officials of the capital in Chang'an, they were unremarkable. Even though Yan Liben's rank was relatively high, he was only an official of an unpopular yamen. He did not have any authority. However, Li Wangyu's disciples had a very special status within Chang'an. In particular, after Li Wangyu had been conferred the title of Prince of Qin and received news that he had not perished in the desert, Ma Zhou and the others were revered within Chang'an. Even those officials whose ranks were far higher than Ma Zhou, Lu Rengue, and Shangguan Yi were courteous upon seeing them, not daring to offend them in the slightest. There was no need to explain the reason. It was because behind them was the great backing of Li Wangyu. Everyone knew how much Li Er valued and doted on his nephew, Li Wangyu. Not only had he bestowed his own title, the Prince of Qin, upon Li Wangyu's marriage, even Princess Chang'an had married into the Prince of Qin's household, becoming one of Li Wangyu's consorts. Even though Li Wangyu kept a low profile, he could not resist the reverence that the officials of the capital had for him. With Li Wangyu not appearing, Ma Zhou and the other disciples instead received all sorts of flattery. Even the officials from aristocratic families did not dare to lightly provoke them. After all, the aristocratic families, led by the 5 surnames and 7 nobles, had suffered too many losses at the hands of Li Wangyu. Even the clan heads of the aristocratic families did not want to lightly offend Li Wangyu. Naturally, these officials from aristocratic families had no choice but to retreat. After hearing too much flattery, it was inevitable that Ma Zhou and the others would become somewhat arrogant. They dared to argue with the aristocratic officials in Taiji Palace because they had the confidence to face off against their teacher, the Prince of Qin, Li Wangyu. Otherwise, how could they have the right to speak in such a large Taiji Palace? Yesterday, Ma Zhou and the others rushed to Dingzhou village and requested to see their teacher. But they were directly rejected. This was something that had never happened before, and they immediately felt that something was wrong. Recalling their actions during this period of time, everyone, including Ma Zhou, broke out in cold sweat. It seemed that they were a little too flamboyant. Therefore, when they wanted to apologize to Li Wangyu in the morning court assembly, they were frightened by Li Wangyu's words and knelt on the ground, not daring to say anything. If they really angered their master and were expelled from the sect, they would really be finished. The saliva of the people of the world could drown them. If they didn't have the protection of their teacher, Li Wangyu, those aristocratic family officials would probably immediately surround them and devour them until not even their bones were left. "Teacher, we were wrong, please punish us." Ma Zhou and the others didn't dare to argue, and could only lower their heads and beg for mercy. Chang'an was actually dissatisfied with the actions of Ma Zhou and the others during this period of time, but because of Li Wangyu's face, he didn't say anything and didn't help either side in the court. At this moment, seeing Ma Zhou and the others in this state, the old man couldn't bear to see them like this. He advised, "Zio, it's better not to blame them anymore. Speaking of which, as a teacher you also have a responsibility. Who told you to go to the western desert north for 2 years? It's normal for them to make some mistakes because of your lack of discipline. Young and frivolous, haha, young and frivolous." Chang'an had forgotten that in terms of age, Li Wangyu was the youngest teacher. Among his disciples, even the youngest, Shangguan Yi, was a few years older than Li Wangyu. It was just that Li Wangyu had always been a monster, so Chang'an had long forgotten that he had just reached the age of 20. Li Wangyu glared at Ma Zhou and the others. "Humph, since Master Yu has pleaded for you today, I will give you another chance. If there is a next time, don't blame me for expelling you from the sect." "Yes, we dare not disobey." Ma Zhou and the others heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly thanked Li Wangyu and Chang'an. "However, you can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. You bastards, within 10 days, each of you will copy the Analects of Confucius 100 times. This will be your punishment." When Ma Zhou and the others heard this, their faces instantly darkened. The Analects of Confucius was about 10,000 words, so copying it 100 times would be more than 1,000,000 words. If they wanted to copy it in 10 days, Their hands would be crippled. Ma Zhou, Yan Liben, Lu Rengui, Shangguan Yi and the others looked at each other, but could only obediently nod and agree. Without a doubt, if they wanted to copy 1,000,000 words in 10 days, they would not need to think about sleeping during this period of time. After Li Wangyu had finished teaching his disciples a lesson, it was time to go to the imperial court. With his current status, going to the imperial court would definitely be his first priority. This was the etiquette of the imperial court, so Li Wangyu could not decline. He could only walk to the front of the hundreds of officials and lead the civil and military officials to the imperial court. After Li Wangyu appeared, the aristocratic officials also secretly shouted and made up their minds that no matter what, they would make the king of Qin suffer today. In short, they had the right to do so. These few days, through the mouths of the aristocratic families, intentionally or unintentionally adding fuel to the fire, had already caused an uproar in the city. Ma Zhou, the instigator, had attracted a lot of criticism in the streets. Even the citizens of Chang'an knew what it meant when the emperor wanted to build a new palace. The wool came from the sheep's back, so how could they not be afraid? Fortunately, the officials did not know that in the future, Wu Meinyang had even stopped paying the salaries of the officials in the capital in order to build the Ming Palace. Otherwise, these officials would probably want to strangle Ma Zhou to death. If not for Li Wangyu's high prestige in the streets, there would probably be people throwing rotten eggs and vegetables at Ma Zhou's residence. Actually, Ma Zhou now regretted it. He regretted that he had written a memorial to ask Pai Lupi to build a new palace. But he was also riding a tiger and could not back down. Now, he could only pray that his teacher, Li Wangyu, had the ability to help him resolve this matter. In Taiji Palace, Pai Lupi ascended the throne amidst the greetings of the officials. After the ceremony, the palace suddenly quieted down. Everyone looked at Li Wangyu, who was in the front row of the hundreds of officials. Even Pai Lupi was the same. He looked at Li Wangyu with burning eyes. Li Wangyu felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by everyone. He could only rub his nose helplessly and cough lightly. He walked forward and said in a clear voice, "Reporting to Your Majesty, I, Li Wangyu, have something to report." "Report it." "I heard that Censor Ma Zhou had once reported to Your Majesty to build a new palace for the retired emperor. I think this is inappropriate." After Li Wangyu said that it was inappropriate, the originally quiet palace immediately burst into a clamor. It was as lively as the busiest market in Chang'an. The faces of Ma Zhou and the others instantly turned pale, their faces drained of all color. The aristocratic officials, on the other hand, looked pleased. If Li Wangyu abandoned his disciples in order to protect himself, then Li Wangyu's reputation as the king of Qin would also be ruined. Who would dare to get close to such a person if he could abandon his own disciples at will? Even Feng Xianling and Gao Shilian frowned. They looked at Li Wangyu with puzzlement. Pai Lupi frowned even more. "Zio, what do you mean by this? I played for 2 days during National Day. Today I will make up for it." Chapter 1059. In everyone's opinion, even if Li Wangyu did not approve of his disciples' memorial, he should not have made such a statement in public. His words were equivalent to sentencing Ma Zhou and the others to death. Even he, the teacher, said that it was inappropriate. What else could Ma Zhou and the others argue? The crimes that the aristocratic families had previously accused Ma Zhou and the others would fall on them. Even if Pai Lupi wanted to protect Ma Zhou and the others, he had to consider the attitude of the civil and military officials in the court. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only shed tears and punish Ma Su and the others. When the noise in the main hall subsided, Li Wangyu smiled and said again, "Your Majesty, Censor Ma's memorial is indeed inappropriate. Although the Tang dynasty is growing stronger and stronger, and we have the kingdoms of the western region and the northern desert grassland under our rule, it would be difficult for us to take out a large amount of gold and copper coins to build a new palace for the retired emperor. Moreover, Your Majesty is a wise ruler. You are expanding the territory and serving the people. You should consider letting the Great China and all the kingdoms come to court. If Your Majesty were to build this new palace, no matter how magnificent it is, how would it compare to the Apang Palace of the first emperor? Why should Your Majesty repeat the mistakes of the Great Qin dynasty?" Li Wangyu's words were not polite at all. Pai Lupi was so angry that his face darkened. In fact, although Ma Zhou was the one who submitted the memorial regarding the construction of the Daming Palace, Ma Zhou was also hinted by Pai Lupi to submit the memorial. Pai Lupi's purpose was very simple. He wanted to show his filial piety to Li Yuan in front of the world. To put it bluntly, it was just a political show. Therefore, when Li Yuan died, Pai Lupi immediately ordered to stop the construction of the Daming Palace. As for Li Ji, that brat who later started to rebuild the Daming Palace, it was because he disliked the old Taichi Palace and wanted to enjoy himself. His purpose was completely different from Pai Lupi's. Pai Lupi actually did not care much about the luxuries of an emperor. Otherwise, he would not have stayed in the Taiji Palace all this time. This was Li Wangyu. He was actually in the main hall, in front of all the officials, criticizing him for forgetting the first emperor's Apang Palace. How could he not be angry? In the Apang Palace, Xiangyu had burned it down, and it was nowhere to be found. Li Wangyu's words were clearly saying that Pai Lupi couldn't love the people, couldn't seek long-term peace, ignored the lessons of history, and indulged in sensual pleasures. That was why he rose to power. This was simply pointing at a monk and scolding a bald donkey. No matter how much Pai Lupi thought highly of Li Wangyu, no matter how much he doted on him, he was so agitated that it was difficult for him to control himself. His anger was about to explode. Before he could say anything, Li Wangyu added fuel to the fire for Pai Lupi. Your Majesty, I have recently written a poem about the Apang Palace. I wonder if Your Majesty is interested in hearing it? Pai Lupi's face turned even darker. He said coldly, everyone knows that King Qin's literary talent is the best in the world. Since King Qin has a new work, why don't you recite it so that I can appreciate it too? He did not even call Li Wangyu by his courtesy name. He directly called him King Qin. One could see how angry he was. Li Wangyu ignored him completely. He smiled and nodded at Pai Lupi. Then, he raised his voice and recited it loudly. The 6 kings are complete. The 4 seas are one. Mount Shu is born. Ipang is born. It covers more than 300 miles, isolates the sun and the sky. Every 5 steps there is a building, every 10 steps there is a pavilion. Following Li Wangyu's recitation, the Taiji Palace became so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone held their breath and listened attentively to Li Wangyu reciting this poem. Du Mu's Apang Palace Ode had been passed down through the ages. There was no need to talk about its literary talent. Li Wangyu shamelessly plagiarized it again. This truly shocked all the civil and military officials of the court, as well as Pai Lupi in the hall. The magnificent description vividly portrayed the grandeur of Apang Palace, fully demonstrating the grandeur of the time. Everyone was fascinated by it. Even Pai Lupi's expression softened. He was almost about to clap his hands and cheer. But just as everyone was fascinated by it, Li Wangyu changed the topic. He began to recite the 3rd section of the Apang Palace Ode. Sigh. The heart of one person is the heart of 10,000 people. Qin loves extravagance, but people also miss their home. Alas, the one who destroyed the 6 countries was the 6 countries, not Qin. The people of Qin did not have time to mourn, but the later generations mourned. The later generations mourned but did not reflect, but also caused the later generations to mourn the later generations. This was a profound judgment. The historical lesson was described in detail and thought-provoking. It was a warning for the later generations, but also a feeling of concern for the country and its people. But these words in Pai Lupi's ears were extremely ironic. After Li Wangyu finished reciting the several hundred words of Apang Palace Ode, the Taiji Palace Ode was so quiet that it was suffocating. Whether it was the officials of the aristocratic families, Fang Xianling or Gao Shilian, none of them dared to make a sound. They were afraid of angering Pai Lupi on the throne and inviting trouble to themselves. But the eyes of the aristocratic family officials were filled with excitement. They felt that Li Wangyu was simply seeking his own death. To recite such a magnificent masterpiece in the air, it was completely rubbing Li Er's face on the ground, rubbing it against his face again and again. If Pai Lupi did not severely punish Li Wangyu today, where would his dignity as an emperor be? Ma Zhou and the others at this moment were ashen-faced. Their hands and feet could not help but tremble. Their division master was courting death. Ma Zhou wanted to slap himself. Why did he have to think about Pai Lupi's thoughts? Why did he have to follow Pai Lupi's hint and submit the memorial? If he could, he would rather see Li Wangyu be punished. Even if he was sent to the censorate's prison, he would not complain. Pai Lupi on the throne at this moment was on the verge of exploding. Even if he was an emperor, to be ridiculed by Li Wangyu with such a masterpiece, he could not tolerate it. Li Er could imagine that this Epang ode to palace would definitely be passed down through the ages, and accompanying it would be his heroic reputation. He would also be labeled as someone who indulged in sensual pleasures, and it would be passed down through the ages. This was something that Pai Lupi, who had always prided himself as a wise emperor and wanted to leave his name in history, could not tolerate. But just as Pai Lupi's balloon was about to burst, Li Wangyu spoke again. Your Majesty, what do you think of this Epang Palace ode? Good. Very good. Very good. Pai Lupi's cold voice was squeezed out from between his teeth. His gaze towards Li Wangyu was even colder than before. If looks could kill, Li Wangyu's body would have been riddled with holes by now. Li Wangyu did not see Pai Lupi's extremely ugly expression at all. He continued, minding his own business. The lesson of the Qin people should be taken as a warning. Therefore, this new palace cannot be repaired by His Majesty. The court cannot be repaired, but just as Pai Lupi was about to explode, Li Wangyu changed the topic. But I can repair it. Nanny? Li Wangyu's sudden change of topic almost broke the waists of Pai Lupi and the officials in Taiji Palace. What did this guy just say? The new palace cannot be repaired by His Majesty, but he can? What did this mean? Li Wangyu did not wait for the crowd to react and continued. Your Majesty, as a member of the imperial family, the retired emperor is also my elder. Being filial to the retired emperor is also my duty. Therefore, as the ruler of the Tang dynasty, Your Majesty should set an example and put the country first. But I do not have such considerations. Furthermore, I am quite wealthy. Why don't I invest in the construction of the new palace? After Li Wangyu finished speaking, everyone, including Pai Lupi, almost forgot to breathe. Chapter 1060. Pai Lupi felt that his brain was not enough today. He even suspected that there was something wrong with his ears, and that he was having auditory hallucinations. In the Taiji Palace, in front of the officials, Li Wangyu, this bastard, first threw out the famous poem Epang Ode to the Palace, which made him spit on his face. Then, without waiting for him to explode in anger, this guy took a turn and shamelessly said that he would be responsible for all the costs of building the new palace. Pai Lupi took a deep breath, stabilized his mind that was about to explode, and asked, Ziyu, what nonsense are you talking about? Do you know how much the new palace covers? How much do you need to spend? How much property do you have? Can you build a new palace for the retired emperor? The Daming Palace was the political center of the Tang dynasty. In the 200 years after its construction, there were 17 Tang emperors who handled the court affairs here. The Daming Palace, after being completed, covered an area of 3.2 million square meters. In contrast, the Forbidden City of the later generations only covered an area of 720,000 square meters. In other words, the Daming Palace was equivalent to 4 Forbidden City. Of course, the Daming Palace was not so huge from the beginning. Even if Pai Lupi wanted to show filial piety to his father, he was not crazy enough to do so. The scale of the Daming Palace was obtained through the continuous reconstruction, expansion and renovation of the Tang emperors. Of course, the construction of the new palace was not started by Ma Zhou and Pai Lupi, because the Taiji Palace had been in disrepair for a long time. In fact, including Pai Lupi, the imperial court also had plans to build a new palace. The Ministry of Works also had plans for this, including where the new palace would be built and how large it would be. It was just that the construction of the new palace would cost a lot of money, so the plan was just a plan and there was no official plan to start construction. It could be said that if the construction of the new palace was started, the entire Tang dynasty would have to tighten their belt. The huge financial pressure was also the reason why Pai Lupi immediately stopped the construction of the Daming Palace when Li Yuan died. Under such circumstances, Li Wangyu actually dared to boast shamelessly that he would fund the construction of a new palace for Li Yuan. If this wasn't crazy, then what was? Pai Lupi knew that Li Wangyu's net worth was not small. He might even be richer than the royal treasury. But even so, to support the construction of such a huge new palace was like throwing a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Li Wangyu was indifferent to Pai Lupi's question. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he bowed to Pai Lupi and said, "Your Majesty, I have a gift for Your Majesty. I hope that Your Majesty will accept it." Pai Lupi was getting more and more confused about what he was trying to do. He could only nod his head in agreement. Li Wangyu gestured to me too. Soon, 2 servants walked into the hall with a scroll in their hands. Everyone in the hall was getting more and more curious. They didn't understand what Li Wangyu was trying to do. With Pai Lupi's permission, the 2 servants slowly unrolled the scroll and presented it to Pai Lupi and the officials. On the scroll, palaces and pavilions appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The hall was quiet for a few breaths of time. Then it became noisy again. Which palace is depicted in this painting? It's so grand and magnificent. A pavilion every 5 steps, a pavilion every 10 steps. Could this be the Apang Palace? The 2 rivers melt and flow into the palace walls. Long bridges lie on the waves, not clouds and dragons. This really is the Apang Palace in the Apang Palace Ode written by the King of Qin. Wait, that's not right. The architectural style in this painting is not the Qin style. It is the architectural style of our Tang dynasty. Yan Libin and his elder brother, Yan Lide, were the great general and junior supervisor respectively. After seeing this scroll, they didn't even care about the etiquette of the imperial court. Without Li Er's permission, they stumbled over to the scroll and began to carefully examine it. Pai Lupi also couldn't help but stand up from his throne. He walked down the royal steps and carefully examined the scroll. "Zio, could this be the blueprint of the new palace that you drew?" Combined with what Li Wangyu had said before, Pai Lupi already had some guesses. However, he couldn't help but ask in a trembling voice. It was no wonder that Pai Lupi couldn't stay calm. The scroll that Li Wangyu had drawn showed the palaces, pavilions, and waterside pavilions. It was too exquisite. A paradise on earth, a jade palace. This was Pai Lupi's admiration for the palaces in the painting. Without waiting for Li Wangyu to answer, Yan Libin immediately answered, "Your Majesty, it can't be wrong. This must be the new palace drawn by the teachers. This should be the front court, and this should be the inner court. Inside and outside, platforms, halls, pavilions, everything is there." Yan Libin was indeed the designer of the Daming Palace in history. Although Li Wangyu had drawn the scroll, he only looked at it for a moment and accurately identified the key points. Li Wangyu smiled pretentiously and nodded. He pointed at the scroll and said, "Your Majesty, I heard that the new palace is called Yang'an Palace. I don't think it's very appropriate." "The Book of Songs," Daya said. "King Wen had great virtue, so he was King Wu who answered the heavens. King Wen and King Wu inherited each other. Their virtue grew, so they were called Daming. I think that the new palace should be called Daming Palace. What do you think, Your Majesty?" What he said was actually the origin of the name of the Daming Palace in history. It meant that he used King Zhou's diligence and wisdom as an example to encourage himself. Of course, Pai Lupi didn't know the origin of the Daming Palace that Li Wangyu mentioned. After thinking for a while, he felt that it was very reasonable and couldn't help but applaud. "Good. Ziyu's words are exactly what I want. Daming Palace. Good. If the new palace is built, it will be called Daming Palace. Your Majesty is wise." The pretentious plagiarist didn't have any psychological burden. He bowed and flattered Pai Lupi. After flattering Pai Lupi a little, Li Wangyu pointed at the painting and said, "Your Majesty, please look. This is the painting of the Daming Palace that I drew. This is the front court. Your Majesty can hold court meetings here in the future to deal with court affairs. I took the initiative to name the palaces of the front court as Hanyuan Palace, Political Announcing Palace, and Zichen Palace. This is the inner court's supreme liquid pool." In fact, Li Wangyu didn't know what the real Daming Palace looked like. After all, the Daming Palace had been destroyed in the long river of history. Even in the future, the Daming Palace National Ruins Park was built in Xing. He had even seen the virtual reconstruction of the Daming Palace when he was traveling. However, that was only the argument and speculation made by the historians of the future based on the ruins of the Daming Palace. Therefore, the painting of the Daming Palace that he drew was completely based on his imagination. There was no actual basis. However, even if it was based on Li Wangyu's imagination, The painting was enough to make everyone gasp in amazement. There was only one reason. It was big enough and grand enough. For example, the Taiji Palace's Taiji Palace was 3 meters tall. Then, Li Wangyu set the Hanyuan Palace of the Daming Palace to be 6 meters tall. The entire palace was leaning against the blue sky. It was tall and majestic, and it was breathtaking. That was not all. In the painting that Li Wangyu drew, there was a palace that was 7 to 8 floors high. He even pointed out to Pai Lupi that it was the Yin and Yang Palace that was specially designed for Pai Lupi. In the beginning, Pai Lupi was very excited. However, the more he looked at the painting, the worse his expression became. In the end, he couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Zio, you are so thoughtful. However, I think that the Daming Palace in your painting can only be built by an immortal. The two brothers, Yen Liben and Yen Lide, nodded silently at the side. They agreed with Pai Lupi's words. Many officials in the Taiji Palace who knew about architecture also shook their heads. Obviously, no one thought that the Daming Palace that Li Wangyu drew could be built by human hands. Other things aside, how could the Yin and Yang Palace, which was dozens of meters tall, be built? One must know that since ancient times in China, other than the Buddhist pagodas, there had never been such a tall building. Chapter 1061. According to the records of Luoyang Temple, the pagoda of Yongning Temple in the Northern Wei Dynasty was 9 stories high, 1,000 feet high, and made of wood. It was the tallest building in ancient Huaxia. Regardless of the authenticity of the records, whether a wooden pagoda could be built to 100 meters high or not, the technical difficulty of building a pagoda was completely different from building a palace. In addition, Huaxia's tradition of using wood as a building material limited the appearance of tall buildings. In response to Pai Lupi's question, Li Wangyu's smile became even brighter. Your Majesty, I can definitely build this Daming Palace. There is no problem. Your Majesty, did you forget that I am the direct disciple of the ancestor? His words made Pai Lupi's eyes brighten. Pai Lupi and the other officials believed that Li Wangyu was the direct disciple of the ancestor. If that was the case, it was not impossible for Li Wangyu to build this new palace. Only Yen Liben, a technical geek, continued to ask after hearing his teacher's words. Teacher, forgive me for being stupid, but how can a wooden building be built so high? I really don't understand. Li Wangyu smiled. Liben, why must it be built with wood? Why can't it be built with bricks? This teacher, I'm afraid it's not appropriate. How can bricks be used to build a palace? Yen Liben was still thinking about it. Pai Lupi also looked at Li Wangyu with a questioning gaze. Although he did not understand architecture, he also felt that it was not appropriate to build a new palace with bricks. After all, Huaxia had been accustomed to using wood as a building material since ancient times, and bricks were rarely used. In fact, Huaxia had been accustomed to using wood since ancient times, mainly because there were enough wood resources. Plus, wood was easy to process, convenient to transport, and had a good insulation effect. Huaxia also had the tradition of building a house with stone. Your Majesty, there is a saying in the book, Zhao Wang was a pioneer of wisdom, and asked his disciples to take up his teaching. He built a stone palace and went to his teacher. It can be seen that stone palaces have existed since ancient times, and it is not only made of wood that can make a palace. After all, wood is easy to be damaged. However, if it is built with bricks, I believe that Daming Palace can last for hundreds or thousands of years. Li Wangyu's words made Pai Lupi very tempted. Looking at the painting in front of him, he was even more tempted. If the palace in the painting could really be built, it must be very magnificent, right? And what moved Pai Lupi the most was that Li Wangyu actually said that he would pay for the construction of Noda's palace. It would be strange if the stingy Pai Lupi didn't feel anything. Pai Lupi had already forgotten that Li Wangyu had used Epeng Ode to Palace to scold him. The more he looked at the painting of the Daming Palace, the more he liked it. Zio, can you really build such an extravagant new palace? You really don't need me or the imperial court to pay for it. Pai Lupi still didn't believe Li Wangyu's words. Actually, it wasn't just him who didn't believe it. None of the civil and military officials in Taiji Palace believed it. Ma Zhou and the others' eyes were red. They lowered their heads and didn't say anything. They clenched their fists so tightly that their nails dug into their flesh. In their minds, Their teacher must have been prepared to spend all of his family's wealth to build a new palace for His Majesty and the retired emperor in order to clean up their mess. Thinking of this, Ma Zhou wished that he could just let Pai Lupi give the order to beat him to death. He regretted even more that he had been so muddle-headed and impulsive to the imperial court to build a stupid new palace. If he wasn't in the palace, Ma Zhou would have knelt in front of Li Wangyu and cried loudly, begging for his teacher's forgiveness. Yin Li was the junior supervisor of the Directorate of Generals. He knew very well that building a new palace like the one in Li Wangyu's painting wasn't something that a single family's wealth could afford. Even the current imperial court of the Tang dynasty couldn't afford it, let alone his teacher. In his opinion, such a huge project couldn't be completed without at least a few decades. How could Li Wangyu afford it? Li Wangyu was very calm in the face of everyone's doubts. Your Majesty, I am confident that I can build the Daming Palace. It won't take too long, just 1 year. Hiss! Li Wangyu's words caused everyone in Taiji Palace to gasp. Those who were close to Li Wangyu all had worried expressions, while the aristocratic family officials all had joyous expressions after recovering from their shock. Your Highness Duke of Qin, you can't speak carelessly. There are no joking words in the palace. Your Majesty, since the Duke of Qin is so certain, why don't Your Majesty fulfill his filial piety? After the Daming Palace is built, the retired emperor will be able to move in and enjoy his remaining years. Your Majesty, I think His Highness Duke of Qin's words are reasonable. Your Majesty, please grant His Highness Duke of Qin's request. Since His Highness Duke of Qin can build the Daming Palace in 1 year without spending a single coin of the imperial court, why don't Your Majesty fulfill His Highness' filial piety? I second that. Nearly half of the officials in Taiji Palace stood up. How could these aristocratic officials let go of such an opportunity? They didn't wait for Pai Lupi to speak before they all stepped forward to request that Pai Lupi agree to Li Wangyu's request. Their plan was simple. They wanted to put Li Wangyu and Pai Lupi on the fire so that they couldn't go back on their words. No one would believe Li Wangyu's words just now. They all treated it as a stalling tactic, a trick used to divert attention. As long as they could force Pai Lupi to agree to this request, if the Daming Palace wasn't built in 1 year, Duke of Qin Li Wangyu would be guilty of deceiving the emperor. In any case, Li Wangyu had said it himself, so he couldn't blame them for making an issue out of it. Li Wang, you didn't pay attention to the clamor of these aristocratic officials. He only treated them as a swarm of buzzing flies. Everyone knew that Duke of Qin Li Wang. You didn't get along with the aristocratic families. Even if Fang Xianling, Gao Shilian, and the other bigwigs wanted to speak up for Li Wangyu, they didn't know what to say. The bigwigs looked at each other and silently shook their heads. They felt that Li Wangyu had been too rash in today's matter. Pai Lupi was naturally unhappy with the aristocratic officials forcing to abdicate, but he couldn't do anything about it. He simply ignored the officials and turned to look at Li Wangyu. Zio, have you really thought it through? Building a new palace isn't something that can be done with a few 100,000 taels of gold. Your Majesty, what I said before, was it a lie? I can really build the Daming Palace. He dared to say that he could build the Daming Palace in 1 year because he was confident. In history, the construction of the large-scale Daming Palace started in June of the 2nd year of Longshuo. When it was completed, it took Li Ji only 4 months of the 3rd year of Longshuo. Moreover, he didn't plan to use too much wood. He planned to use bricks and cement to build the new palace. In this way, as long as the cement and bricks were in place and there were enough craftsmen, the construction speed could only be faster. 1 year's time was more than enough. The construction cost wasn't as high as Pai Lupi and the others thought. Of course, Li Wang, you didn't propose to Pai Lupi that he would fund the construction of the Daming Palace just to clean up after Ma Zhou and the others' mess. Li Wang, you didn't have so much money that he didn't know where to spend it. He didn't want to use his own money to build a palace for Li Yuan. Sometimes spending money wasn't necessarily an opportunity to make money. Chapter 1062. In the face of Li Wangyu's insistence, Pai Lupi could not say anything more. Zio, since you insist, I will agree to your request. The Ministry of Works and the Supervisor of Works will cooperate with you. If you need anything, just tell me. After all, you are building a new palace for the retired emperor. I can't do nothing. After Pai Lupi said this, The aristocratic officials in the hall quieted down. They looked at each other with excitement in their eyes. Obviously, they had achieved their goal. However, Li Wangyu was also waiting for Pai Lupi to say this. Your Majesty, I do have one more thing. Oh, then bring it to me. Li Wangyu gestured to me Tuo again. Then 2 palace eunuchs walked to the center of the hall with a scroll. The curiosity of Li Er and the officials was once again piqued. Li Wangyu had personally drawn the majestic and magnificent Daming Palace in the painting just now. Then what did he draw in this painting? Pai Lupi immediately gestured to the 2 eunuchs to unroll the scroll quickly. After the scroll was unrolled slowly, Pai Lupi could not help but be stunned. On the scroll it was clearly Chang'an City. However, it was different from the ordinary maps of the Tang dynasty. This scroll of Chang'an City was drawn with a 3-dimensional overlooking method, making people feel as if they were looking down at the earth from the 9th heaven. Pai Lupi had seen this method of drawing before. The map that Li Wangyu presented to Pai Lupi was also drawn with this method. However, it was the first time for Pai Lupi, the emperor of the Tang dynasty, to observe the majestic city in such a direct way. Fang Xianling, Zhang Sunwuji, and Gao Shilian, the big shots in the imperial court, were also interested at this moment. They walked to the front of the hall and carefully admired the overlooking map of Chang'an City with Pai Lupi. Actually, because Li Wangyu was in a hurry, his drawing was not very detailed and was very sloppy. However, the unique perspective made Pai Lupi and the other big shots look at it with great interest. From time to time, they would point at a certain part of the picture and chat happily. The scroll overlooking Chang'an City in the hands of the 2 eunuchs was not fully unfolded. After receiving Li Wangyu's signal, they slowly unrolled the second half of the scroll. When Pai Lupi and the others saw it, they couldn't help but be stunned. Zio, your map of Chang'an is not right. To the north of Taiji Palace, why is there an extra wall and inner square? Before the Daming Palace was built, Chang'an City of the Tang dynasty was basically a square city. The Taiji Palace was located in the northernmost part of Chang'an City. It was backed by the Xuanwu Gate and Xuanda Gate of Waigua City. However, in the bird's-eye view of Chang'an City drawn by Li Wangyu, a large area of Chang'an City extended to the north. Including the unbuilt Daming Palace, the Chang'an City he drew turned from a square to a rectangle. The location of Taiji Palace was instead the center of Chang'an City. Zio explained to me, what do you mean by this? Pai Lupi couldn't understand Li Wangyu's thoughts. Your Majesty, now that the Tang dynasty has been peaceful for a long time, and the people have been recuperating and multiplying, this is all thanks to your Majesty. Li Wangyu flattered Pai Lupi a little, which made Pai Lupi very happy. However, there are already nearly 1 million people in Chang'an City, and the number is increasing day by day. It's not easy to live in Chang'an University. Therefore, I would like to ask your Majesty to expand Chang'an City, while the new Daming Palace is being built. Of course, all the expenses will be borne by me. Your Majesty, please allow me to expand Chang'an City and let me handle the sales of those houses. Even though Li Wangyu's voice wasn't loud, it was like a thunderclap that exploded within the hall, and it shook everyone to the point they felt dizzy and flabbergasted, causing them to be at a loss for words. Expand Chang'an City? Should this be done? Of course it should. Moreover, such voices had already been heard in the imperial court. Although Chang'an City was the largest, most magnificent, and most standardized capital city in the world at that time, it had been 50 to 60 years since the construction began in the 2nd year of the Sui dynasty and the 8th year of Zhenguan era. As Li Wangyu said, Chang'an City had begun to become crowded. As the Silk Road's trade between the East and West continued to deepen, the East and West cities had long been operating at full capacity. Chang'an and Wanyan counties both wanted to expand the East and West cities, but the people living in the surrounding houses were either rich or noble. It was impossible to demolish them. Therefore, this idea was just an idea. In addition to the terrain of Chang'an City, the northern part of the city was relatively low. Every summer it would be unusually hot. This was also the reason why Pai Lupi wanted to build the new palace on higher ground in the northern part of the city. Even those officials and nobles mostly lived near the Taiji Palace. The terrain was also relatively low, and they also had a headache about the hot summer and the humid environment. This was also one of the reasons why Li Wangyu lived in Dingzhou village for a long time, and didn't want to return to his mansion in Kaihua Square. However, the cost of expanding Chang'an City was an unimaginable astronomical figure in everyone's eyes. It was several times larger than the construction of the Daming Palace. Pai Lupi was stunned for a long time before he said, "Zio, did you really think about what you said just now? Do you know how much it will cost to expand Chang'an City?" "Your Majesty, of course I know," Li Wangyu answered with certainty. However, everyone in the hall thought that Li Wangyu had gone crazy. Of course he wasn't crazy. Instead, he was secretly delighted. The so-called construction of the Daming Palace was just a guise to attract Pai Lupi. The real purpose was to expand Chang'an City. To be more precise, it was to develop real estate. As he said before, real estate in the Tang dynasty was not worth much, but it was divided by location. Lai Hat's Noda house in Hu County was only 30 to 50,000 yuan. However, after Ma Zhou became an official, he wanted to buy a much smaller house in Chang'an City, but he needed more than 100,000 yuan. Location, location, and location. This was the only way to develop real estate at any time. If he only went to the northern part of Chang'an City to expand the new city, no one would be interested. However, if he built the Daming Palace first, then the value of the new city around the Daming Palace would be debatable. Even if the aristocratic families were always intentionally or unintentionally against the imperial power in Pai Lupi, they still needed to have enough social status. Just like how they could live near the Taiji Palace in the northern part of Chang'an City now. Living near the Taiji Palace in the future would also reflect the status of these nobles and aristocratic families. How much do you think such a location should be sold for? After being reminded by Su Chongqing, Li Wangyu continued to think a lot. To attract the richest people in the Tang dynasty, the location alone was not enough to make him a lot of money. More importantly, he had to provide enough attractive products. Li Wangyu was not worried about this at all. With knowledge more than 2,000 years ahead, it was easy for him to come up with something novel to attract the bumpkins of the Tang dynasty. Since the Daming Palace could be built in 10 months in history, even if it was not the whole thing, it was enough to show that Li Wangyu could do it with bricks. Although this was a bit exaggerated, it was not outrageous. After all, the more people there were, the more power there was. With tens of thousands of craftsmen, whether it was efficiency or speed, it would not be too slow. Chapter 1063. Li Wangyu's words silenced Pai Lupi once again. He was speechless for a long time, but his gaze continued to wander between the two paintings that the chamberlain had unfolded. Obviously, the two paintings that Li Wangyu had drawn were very tempting to Pai Lupi, but he instinctively refused to believe his nephew's words. Building a huge new palace with the power of one person and expanding it to the size of half of Chang'an City sounded like a fantasy story. It was hard to accept. Pai Lupi knew that Li Wangyu was rich, but no matter how rich he was, Pai Lupi did not think that it was enough to complete these two huge projects. "Ziyu, let me think about this carefully." Pai Lupi shook his head and did not immediately agree. But even if Pai Lupi did not agree, how could the officials from the aristocratic families let go of such a good opportunity? In their eyes, since the Duke of Qin Li Wangyu was walking further and further down the path of seeking death, they naturally had to give him a push. Wang Ying immediately stood up and bowed to Pai Lupi. "Your Majesty, I think that the Duke of Qin's words are very reasonable. Now that the number of citizens in Chang'an City is increasing day by day, it is imperative that we expand Chang'an City. Since the Duke of Qin has the courage and does not need to waste money in the imperial court, why not? Your Majesty should agree to the Duke of Qin's memorial." "Minister Wang is right, I second that. Your Majesty, please reconsider. This is beneficial to the citizens and the imperial court. Your Majesty, please agree to the Duke of Qin's memorial." A group of aristocratic family officials chimed in one after another, causing Li Heir to hesitate for a moment. He was unhappy, but he could not refute the words of Wang Ying and the others. Pai Lupi once again looked at Li Wangyu. Li Wangyu smiled and nodded slightly, indicating that this was exactly what he was thinking. Seeing that Li Wangyu was so confident, Pai Lupi had no choice but to follow the will of the people, and agree to Li Wangyu. "Good. In that case, I will agree to the Duke of Qin's memorial. The construction of the Daming Palace and the expansion of Chang'an City will be handed over to the Duke of Qin. This matter is of great importance. and the Duke of Qin has the right to act at his discretion. Except for money and silk, the imperial court will cooperate with the Duke in everything else. In addition, the construction of the Daming Palace and the expansion of Chang'an City will be handed over to the Duke of Qin, the Ministry of Works, the craftsmen, laborers, and this year's Guangzhou road workers. Does anyone have any objections? The Pai was to help Li Wangyu. The Duke of the King of Qin City was the Emperor of the Emperor. Lupi, the Pai Lupi could help Li in terms of manpower. In Guangzhou Road, all the civilian laborers who needed to serve the corvée this year, as well as the craftsmen from the Ministry of Works and the General Supervisor, were all the help that Li Heir could give Li Wangyu. Thank you, Your Majesty. Li Wangyu accepted it with a smile. With enough free craftsmen and laborers, his money-making plan seemed to be able to save a lot of expenses. Your Majesty, I will bear all the expenses for the construction of the Daming Palace and the expansion of Chang'an City. However, if there are any profits, I wonder. Li Wangyu immediately asked. Once the expansion of half of Chang'an City was completed, the profits would be unimaginable. Li Wangyu had to confirm this first. Otherwise, if someone took the peach in the future, wouldn't his efforts be in vain? However, whether it was Pai Lupi or Feng Xianling, they didn't think that the expansion of Chang'an City would be profitable. Therefore, after hearing his words, they couldn't help but shake their heads and smile bitterly. Pai Lupi was also helpless. He shook his head and sighed. If Zio is capable and can make profits from it, it will all belong to the mansion of the King of Qin. I and the imperial court won't take a single cent. Wang Ying and other aristocratic officials also looked at him as if he were a fool. They smiled but didn't say anything. In their opinion, not to mention how much money it would cost to build the Daming Palace, the cost of the expansion of half of Chang'an City, and the construction of the outer city walls would be enough to empty the mansion of the King of Qin. It would be a fool's dream to think that he could make profits from it. In fact, their calculation was not wrong. In history, it took the Northern Song dynasty 3 years to build the new capital Bianliang, which was Kaifeng. The city walls were more than 50 miles long and more than 300,000 laborers were recruited. Then, how many laborers would it take to expand half of Chang'an City? Even if the laborers were recruited by the imperial court and didn't need to be paid, there were so many laborers that they had to be fed, right? With so many people, the daily cost of food and drink alone would be a huge figure. Naturally, they were happy to see that Li Wangyu was willing to spend all his money on such a thankless task. Moreover, they didn't believe that Li Wangyu had enough money to build the Daming Palace in Noda within a year. Both sides had their own ideas, but they tacitly agreed on such a big matter at the imperial court meeting. Pai Lupi issued an imperial edict that the construction of the new palace and the expansion of Chang'an City would be handed over to Li Wangyu. Li Wangyu was very satisfied with the result. After the imperial court meeting, he declined the invitation of Feng Xianling, Gao Shilian, and other big shots to stay. He directly led his several disciples back to Dingzhou village. Along the way, Ma Zhou and the others kept silent, but they looked miserable. Ma Zhou especially was full of regret. In their opinion, Li Wangyu did this to clean up the mess for them. But how could the disciples not be worried when they had to pay such a big price? Li Wangyu ignored Ma Zhou and the others. After returning to Dingzhou village, he immediately found Su Chongqing to report the good news. Chongqing, it's done. His Majesty has handed over the construction of the Daming Palace and the expansion of Chang'an City to our family. Li Wangyu laughed and picked up his son and daughter. He spun a few rounds excitedly. Ji Badger, your father is going to make money for you again. You two little fellows are really too lucky. You're born as the second generation of a rich family. Are you happy? Li Wangyu's behavior made Ma Zhou and the others look at each other. They didn't understand what was wrong with their teacher. Although they didn't understand the term rich second generation, they roughly understood the meaning of Li Wangyu's words. What did he mean by making money again? Could it be that there were profits to be made? Ma Zhou hesitated for a while. In the end, he plucked up his courage and asked, "Teacher, what did you mean by what you said earlier?" Li Wangyu ignored him, minding his own business as he played with his son and daughter. It was Su Chongqing who saw the ashamed looks on Ma Zhou and the others' faces and couldn't bear it, so he spoke up and revealed her and Li Wangyu's plan. After understanding Su Chongqing's words, Ma Zhou, Yen Liben, and the others looked as if they had seen a ghost. They looked at Li Wangyu, who was playing with his son and daughter, in disbelief. They would never have thought that their teacher would make use of this to make profits. While Ma Zhou and the others were dumbfounded, the old butler Li Heng hurried over. Lang Jun, His Majesty, and the other officials are here. Alright, this chapter is definitely lousy to the extreme. Allow me to adjust my state of mind. Chapter 1064. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, the end of the 7th year of Chang'an had arrived. On the 26th day of the 12th lunar month, the imperial court had already begun the New Year's Eve holiday. All the officials of the government offices stopped their work and prepared to go home for the new year. However, the citizens of Chang'an, and who had always loved to gossip, keenly noticed that something big was about to happen in Chang'an. And after the morning drum sounded and the gates opened, the citizens who lived in the squares near the eastern and western markets found that the wealthy merchants and barbarian merchants had all put on new clothes and were heading for the gates in the northern part of the city. The nobles and officials who lived in the northern part of the city did the same. They were escorted by their guards and headed for the 9 gates in the northern part of the city. The 9 gates in the northern part of Chang'an, and had been closed for half a year. Everyone knew that Prince Qin was building the Daming Palace and expanding the city outside the 9 gates in the northern part of Chang'an. Therefore, the citizens of Chang'an and were gossiping again when these rich and powerful people swarmed to the northern part of the city. Unlike the officials in the imperial court, the citizens did not worry about whether Li Wangyu had enough money to complete these 2 projects. They were more interested in discussing how much money the Prince of Qin's mansion had, whether it was as rich as a country, and whether the imperial court's treasury or the Prince of Qin's mansion's treasury had more gold. The northern part of Chang'an and had become a huge construction site. Hundreds of thousands of workers and craftsmen from Guangzhong Road were busy there every day. 4-wheeled carriages were like ants, transporting all kinds of wood, stone, bricks, and other building materials from all over the Tang dynasty to the northern part of Chang'an. After half a year of construction, the Daming Palace had begun to take shape. At this moment, the nobles and officials of Chang'an, as well as the wealthy merchants and Persian barbarian merchants, had gathered outside the thick vermilion walls of the Daming Palace. The officials in the imperial court had different statuses, so they naturally crowded together with the merchants and barbarian merchants and whispered to each other. Everyone, why did His Majesty summon us here today? Yes, it would be fine if it was just the officials in the imperial court. But why are these merchants and barbarian merchants here? His Majesty is too lenient towards these merchants. At this moment, the merchants were also gathered together and whispering to each other. Duke Chou, I wonder why the Duke of Qin has summoned us here today? Please enlighten us, Master Chou. The one who was clustered in the middle of the merchants was Chou Yuanliang, the head of the Chou family in Chang'an. Everyone knew that the Chou clan had a close relationship with the Duke of Qin's manor. Moreover, with the help of the King of Qin, the Chou family's business grew bigger and bigger. Now the Chou family was in the limelight in the east and west of Chang'an City. Chou Yuanliang was even more respected by the merchants. Because of his relationship with Li Wangyu, even the court officials had to politely address him as Duke Chou when they saw him. He stroked his beard and smiled, but he didn't answer. Instead, he kept them in suspense. Everyone, it's not a bad thing that the Duke of Qin invited us here. As for the specifics, please don't be impatient. You will know in a while. Seeing that Chou Yuanliang refused to say, the merchants were even more curious. But judging from his attitude, it shouldn't be a bad thing. Therefore, even if they were suspicious, these merchants didn't dwell on it. Instead, they began to admire the brand new Daming Palace in front of them. Although the construction of the Daming Palace had yet to be completed, just the towering and thick vermilion palace walls and palace gates in front of everyone was already enough to show the imperial bearing of the Great Tang. Everyone could not help but yearn for the magnificent sight behind the palace gates. Now that half a year had passed, even the ordinary people in Chang'an could already see the new palace named Daming Palace in the north of the city. When they looked up, a towering and huge building was constantly growing taller and taller every day. Naturally, they didn't know that the majestic building was the core of the Daming Palace. It was the Yin and Yang Hall designed by Li Wangyu Pai Lupi's bedroom. The 8-story Yin and Yang Hall had now been completed and topped off. The glittering top of the hall shone brightly under the sunlight every day, showing the noble and inviolable majesty of the imperial power to the world. At this time, Pai Lupi and Li Wangyu were standing on the gate of the Daming Palace, looking down at the crowd below. Zio, is your plan really okay? In order to support you, I have emptied the palace treasury. If those shops cannot be sold, then my palace treasury will be so empty that rats can run away. Li Wangyu silently rolled his eyes and complained in his heart. He really wanted to say to Pai Lupi, if His Majesty didn't believe me, why did he force me to have a share in the first place? Can I refund you the money now? Damn it, what do you mean by supporting me? Back then it was this bastard who led a group of dukes to his residence and insisted on investing in his company, alright? Thinking of this, Li Wangyu couldn't help but feel heartache. The shares that were given out were all money. That day, when Li Wangyu had just returned to his mansion, the old housekeeper Li Heng came to inform him that Pai Lupi had led a group of officials to visit. Although Pai Lupi couldn't figure out what Li Wangyu wanted to do, combined with the many things that Li Wangyu had done in the past, his intuition told him that this matter was definitely not that simple. Therefore, after the court, Pai Lupi found Feng Xianling, Zhang Sun Wuji, and the others for a discussion. After a fruitless discussion, they directly went to Dingzhou village, ready to clarify things in person. Of course, Li Wangyu was unwilling to explain his little abacus, but he couldn't resist the threats and promises of Pai Lupi and the other officials. In the end, he had no choice but to reveal his and Su Chongqing's real estate development plan. In fact, the plan was very simple. It was to build the Daming Palace in the north of the city. After Pai Lupi and Li Yuan moved into the new palace, the center of Chang'an city would naturally shift to the north. In this way, the value of the land in the north of the city, which was originally a wasteland, would rise. This method of speculating on land was not uncommon in the future. In order to develop new areas, there were similar cases of municipal offices being moved to new areas in many cities. After the municipal offices were moved, the originally desolate new areas would naturally be driven up, and the property prices would rise accordingly. In the future, in many cities, the property prices in new areas were much higher than in the old areas. In the history of Chang'an City, although the Daming Palace was built in the north of the city, the area of Chang'an City did not expand. Therefore, the construction of the Daming Palace did not bring any changes to Chang'an City. However, Li Wangyu discovered the secret under Su Chongqing's reminder. Therefore, after some planning, he proposed that he would invest in the construction of the Daming Palace and the expansion of Chang'an City in the imperial court. After figuring out Li Wangyu's purpose, Pai Lupi and the other high dukes actually asked to invest in the project, which made Li Wangyu angry and amused at the same time. Although Pai Lupi and the other high dukes invested in the project, which would reduce his financial pressure, wouldn't it also reduce his profits? In the end, Li Wangyu couldn't outdo the other high dukes. Under Li Wangyu's strong persuasion, the mansion of King Qin took 30% of the shares, the royal family took 30%, and the remaining 40% was divided equally among the high dukes' mansions. After half a year, the gold, copper, and silk of the high dukes' mansions, including Pai Lupi's, were poured into the two bottomless pits of the north of the city and the Daming Palace. Whether they could recover their investment or even make a fortune depended on today. No wonder Pai Lupi, the emperor of the Tang dynasty, was a little nervous. Chapter 1065. While the officials in the imperial court and the merchants were waiting in confusion, the new and heavy gate of the Daming Palace slowly opened. Pai Lupi and Li Wangyu walked out, surrounded by a group of eunuchs and palace guards. The crowd was in an uproar. Today, whether it was the officials in the imperial court or the merchants, they had all received an invitation from Li Wangyu, the king of Qin, to visit the new city in the north of Chang'an. They did not expect that Pai Lupi would show up. "Greetings, your majesty." The officials hurriedly bowed. As for the merchants and barbarians, although most of them had never seen the emperor with their own eyes, they immediately realized who the bearded man standing next to Li Wangyu was. He was dressed in a bright yellow robe embroidered with dragon patterns. Therefore, a group of merchants in luxurious robes bowed to Pai Lupi in confusion. Some bowed with their hands on their chests, some bowed, and some directly knelt down and kowtowed. In short, it was a mess. The officials in the imperial court could not help but twitch their lips and complain in their hearts. Pai Lupi did not feel offended at all. He waved his hand happily, indicating that the crowd could rise. Everyone rise. I heard that the king of Qin invited all of you to visit the Daming Palace today. I was very curious, so I came uninvited. Haha, even I don't know what the Daming Palace looks like. How about all of you come with me today? Li Wangyu laughed in his heart. Pai Lupi was simply lying through his teeth. Since the Daming Palace was opened, Pai Lupi wished that he could go 8 times a day. How could he not know what the new palace looked like? However, seeing that Pai Lupi, the emperor of the Tang dynasty, was trying so hard to be a support, Li Wangyu just pretended that he did not hear anything. Pai Lupi's words caused an uproar among the crowd. The officials were not surprised, but the merchants were all excited. Although the Tang dynasty was open, the status of merchants was not high. In fact, they were very lowly. But now, these mediocre businessmen could actually enter the new palace with His Majesty, the Supreme Emperor of the Tang dynasty. It was a great honor. Some of the older merchants were so excited that they almost fainted. After a while of chaos, Li Wangyu stood up with a smile and said, "Your Majesty, everyone, why don't we enter the new palace first? This subject is also very fearful. I don't know if the new palace can satisfy your Majesty." Pai Lupi laughed. "Very good. We are also looking forward to it. Since that's the case, Zio, lead the way." Li Wangyu smiled and nodded. He gestured to Pai Lupi to follow him. Then, he turned around and walked toward the gate of the Great Ming Palace. The group of court officials and merchants all widened their eyes and craned their necks, impatiently following behind Li Wangyu and Pai Lupi. After everyone passed through the long corridor of the Great Ming Palace, their eyes suddenly opened up. When they saw the scene in front of them, everyone couldn't help but widen their eyes and open their mouths. Their faces were full of disbelief. This is really the Great Ming Palace? Magnificent. Magnificent. Hiss. Did Qin Wang move all the palaces in the world to the human world? Ever since the Great Ming Palace was built, the people of Chang'an always paid attention to it. Even the court officials were very curious about the painting that Qin Wang showed at the Taiji Palace that day. What would it look like when it was built? But no matter how they imagined it, when the Great Ming Palace was reflected in their eyes, they could only feel endless shock. Behind the gate of the Great Ming Palace, what appeared in front of them was a huge and wide square. If it was just a square, it would be fine. Although the square in front of them was very wide, it was not enough to make them lose their composure. Most importantly, the bricks on the ground of this huge square were actually emitting a dazzling light under the sunlight. They were smooth, flat, and even had various colors on them. Looking from afar, there was a huge bright yellow dragon pattern embedded in the ground in the center of the square. More importantly, in this square, there were no cracks on the bricks under their feet. It was a complete piece. Many officials and merchants could not wait to squat down and reach out to touch the bricks on the ground. The floor tiles are so bright and clean, just like jade. But how could jade have so many colors? It's as bright as a mirror, crystal clear. I have lived my whole life, but I don't know what this is. How can there be no seams? Could it be that this is a complete piece of stone? Tao Ancestor above, I'm afraid only the Tao Ancestor can do this, right? Pai Lupi was very satisfied with the reaction of the officials. When he saw this square for the first time, his reaction was not much better than the others. Even Pai Lupi didn't know how Li Wangyu made this kind of stone, jade-like and glass-like bricks. Li Wangyu was even more satisfied with his own masterpiece. He had achieved his goal by being able to achieve this effect with the smallest price. According to the construction tradition of the Tang dynasty, most of the materials used to pave the square were stones mined from the mountains and carefully polished by the craftsmen. To pave the huge square in front of him, just these stones alone cost a lot of time and effort. Li Wangyu naturally didn't want to do such a stupid thing, so he created the terrazzo building material thousands of years in advance. Using crushed stone, glass, quartz stone and other materials, mixing them into cement and bonding them into shape, then grinding and polishing the surface, it can be completed. Because of the low cost, the ease of construction and other reasons, many Huasha families in the 60s and 70s liked to pave terrazzo floors in their houses when they were renovating. The square in front of them was made by Li Wangyu's craftsmen. They poured cement on the spot, mixed with various colored stones, glass and other materials and polished them. And the effect was surprisingly good. The Tangs had never seen such a building material before, so they were naturally shocked. It had to be said that after adding a lot of glass into the terrazzo, under the reflection of the sun, the reflected light was really awe-inspiring. As for the price, it was extremely cheap. Compared to traditional craftsmanship, which required a lot of craftsmen to collect stones from the mountains to carve and process, the terrazzo was extremely cheap. This was also the reason why Li Wang, you didn't think it would cost so much to build a daeming palace. Of course, there were also disadvantages to using terrazzo. As time passed, the terrazzo would become stained and dull. Terrazzo used in the open would also be weathered and eroded. But these were not problems in Li Wangyu's eyes. Anyway, Pai Lupi had so many maids and servants in the palace. He just needed to order them to clean and polish the ground daily. It was no big deal. Li Wangyu smiled and didn't say anything. He waited for the crowd to finish their exclamations before he called them to go inside the daeming palace. Turning his head to look at the court officials and merchants behind him, Li Wangyu couldn't help but feel happy. He felt that he should prepare a small flag to hold in his hand and give each of them a little Red Riding Hood. Then they could go on a tour together. Walking in the daeming palace, Li Wangyu couldn't help but be a little distracted. Perhaps thousands of years later, if the daeming palace could be saved from the flames of war, there would really be tour guides leading tourists here. Come, members, please look here. This is the famous daeming palace of the Tang dynasty. After more than 1,000 years, it still stands in the land of Huaxia, showing us the glory of the Tang dynasty. Chapter 1066. Li Wangyu was like a tour guide, leading a group of officials and merchants through the Great Ming Palace, but everyone was dazzled. Different from the traditional architecture of the Tang dynasty, this daeming palace built under the supervision of Li Wang used a large number of glass, cement, ceramic tiles and other common architectural and decorative materials in later generations. In half a year, the embryonic form of the Great Ming Palace had already appeared. The palace wall, the corner tower, the city gate tower, as well as several important palace halls of the Deming Palace's former imperial court, had all been completed. Apart from the fact that Li Wangyu had invested a large amount of manpower and material resources regardless of the cost, the most important reason for the rapid construction was that he had cut corners on his work. For example, the Hanyuan Palace Hall, the Political Announcement Palace Hall, and the Zichen Palace Hall did not use much wood at all. They were almost all made of cement. After all, according to the Tang system, the wooden beams in the main hall had to be of the best quality, and the diameter had to be enough for 2 people to wrap their arms around it. Not to mention how much such a thick Phoebe would cost. It would cost a fortune to transport it from Chuan, Dianan and other places to Chang'an. Li Wangyu directly omitted it and changed it to a concrete beam. Of course, with the current production of steel in the Tang dynasty, the steel bars in the concrete were out of the question. If the entire daeming palace was built with reinforced concrete, the cost would not be any cheaper than transporting wood. Of course, there must be tendons and bones in the cement. Otherwise, the strength of bending would not be guaranteed, and the house built would be equivalent to a tofu dregs project. Li Wangyu only wanted to save costs, and did not intend to fool Pai Lupi. Therefore, he used bamboo to replace the steel bars and treated them as the bones and tendons of concrete. Bamboo-reinforced concrete was not an invention of Li Wangyu, but a product that had already appeared in later generations. Compared to reinforced concrete, bamboo-reinforced concrete was lighter than reinforced concrete, and it was easy to be molded. Even its strength and elasticity were not affected by temperature. Therefore, it was used more and more widely in the future. Of course, bamboo-reinforced concrete had many shortcomings. The integrity, moldability, and rigidity of bamboo-reinforced concrete were not as good as steel-reinforced concrete, and their durability was also not as good as steel-reinforced concrete. However, these shortcomings were not too big of a problem for Li Wangyu. Although the country later stipulated that the lifespan of concrete buildings was 60 years, in reality, the theoretical lifespan of concrete buildings was very long, even up to hundreds of years. The French had designed and built the first concrete bridge in 1875, and it still existed when Li Wangyu transmigrated. It was the first reinforced concrete building in Paris, built in 1853. Despite the devastation of World War II, it was still in good condition. Therefore, Li Wangyu didn't think that there would be any problems with the daeming palace in his lifetime, even though there were many shortcomings compared to steel bars. The construction speed of the palace was astonishingly fast. After all, compared to the complicated manufacturing process of a wooden palace, the addition of bricks and cement was too simple. Li Wangyu directly ordered people to replace wood with concrete, stone pillars, and stone beams. The exterior was then painted with vermilion paint and painted with all kinds of colors. It was just as beautiful and imposing. Of course, the most important thing was to save money. Pai Lupi and the officials of the imperial court didn't know the secret. Although they knew that the pillars weren't made of wood, they were very satisfied with the indestructible stone pillars. Large floor-to-ceiling glass doors and windows were installed everywhere in the main hall, and it was very transparent. Under the illumination of the sunlight, the entire palace was sparkling and abnormally bright. In addition, Li Wangyu ordered people to transplant all kinds of towering trees from the Qinling Mountains, which made the completed Daming Palace even more imposing. Glass was still considered a luxury item, and the large-scale use of glass made people speechless. In traditional Chinese palaces, the deeper the palace, the more problematic the lighting was. In an era without glass, the bigger the palace, the darker and more humid it would be. Even if the sun was scorching outside, the palace still needed to be lit up with many candles. In addition, the palace was made of wood. After a long time, it would inevitably emit a rotting smell. This was one of the reasons why the emperors were used to building palaces. However, the Daming Palace built by Li Wangyu didn't have any of these problems. Even Pai Lupi was very tempted after seeing the palace of the previous dynasty. He couldn't wait to move in immediately. Unfortunately, the Daming Palace project was only halfway through. Pai Lupi wanted to move in, but he still needed to wait for a while. After visiting the several palaces of the previous dynasty of the Daming Palace, the officials and merchants were so shocked that they didn't know what to say. Other than shock, there was still shock in their hearts. Of course, the officials who were born in aristocratic families were cursing Li Wangyu in their hearts. He was a pure idiot and a prodigal. Who knew how much money would be spent to build the Daming Palace of such a scale? Even if the world knew that the king of Qin was the richest in the world, if he spent his own money to build a palace for Li Yuan and Pai Lupi, he would be either crazy or stupid. The aristocratic family still didn't know that the royal family and the duke's mansions also had shares in the construction of the Daming Palace and the expansion of Chang'an city. They only thought that the money was paid by the king of Qin, Li Wangyu. The aristocratic families mocked Li Wangyu's stupidity in their hearts, but they had nothing to say about the palace in front of them. The crowd walked to the front of the Hanyuan Palace. Pai Lupi was even more satisfied with the main hall of the Daming Palace. Looking up at the lofty royal staircase in the middle of the hall, Pai Lupi couldn't help but be tempted. He simply took off his boots with Mituo's help and stepped into the hall. He was ready to walk up the royal staircase and feel it up close. The floor of the Hanyuan Palace was paved with golden tiles that Li Wangyu ordered the craftsmen to bake. It was magnificent and indescribable. Pai Lupi was about to walk forward when suddenly someone among the officials stood out and stopped him. "Your Majesty, please wait. In my opinion, the Daming Palace built by the King of Qin is magnificent and impeccable. However, there is one oversight. The King of Qin shouldn't have laid tiles in the Hanyuan Palace. If this old official is not mistaken, these floor tiles are made of porcelain?" "Yes, Lord Wang has good eyesight." Li Wangyu nodded with a smile. The one who spoke was Grand Secretary Wang Ying. This old man didn't like Li Wangyu from the beginning, and always wanted to find trouble for Li Wangyu. Today, when he visited the Daming Palace, the old man was shocked. Even if he wanted to be a critic, he couldn't say anything wrong. Instead, he felt extremely uncomfortable. At this moment, he finally found one of Li Wangyu's mistakes. Naturally, he jumped out to criticize. "Your Majesty, since the King of Qin also admitted that the floor of the Hanyuan Palace is made of ceramic tiles, then I think it's very inappropriate. Your Majesty, it's winter now. If you step on it barefoot, how cold would it be? When the Hanyuan Palace is put into use in the future, won't the officials have to sit on these bone-chilling tiles to attend court in the winter? Your Majesty, I'm afraid this is inappropriate." Wang Ying's words stunned Pai Lupi and the other officials. Then they turned their heads to look inside the palace with a strange expression. They couldn't help but nod, feeling that the old man's words were reasonable. According to the custom of the Tang dynasty, one had to remove one's shoes and socks when entering the palace. When attending court, the officials would kneel in the palace. Therefore, including the Taiji Palace, the floor of the palace was all made of wood. Even in the winter, due to the insulation of the wood, one wouldn't feel too cold even if one stepped on it barefoot. However, if it was bricks, then it was different. Pai Lupi couldn't help but frown. He turned his head to look at Li Wang. Zio, have you considered this? Although Pai Lupi had some understanding of the progress of the construction of the Daming Palace, he wasn't clear about the specific details. As the emperor, he naturally didn't care about small things like what kind of floor was laid in the Hanyuan Palace. When Li Wang heard this, he smiled. Your Majesty, everyone. How about we ask Your Majesty and everyone to find out? Chapter 1067. Li Wang gestured for everyone to enter, then took off his boots and stepped barefoot into Hanyuan Palace. In the minds of Pai Lupi and the others, stepping barefoot on the floor in the dead of winter was probably not a comfortable thing. However, Li Wang's expression showed no signs of discomfort. On the contrary, he appeared to be enjoying himself. Pretending to be mysterious. Tai Chongqing Wang Ying muttered in a low voice. However, he still took off his boots, preparing to personally examine them so that he could refute Li Wangyu. Everyone, including Pai Lupi, stepped into Hanyuan Palace one after another. In the next moment, everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. Quite a few impatient people even squatted down and stretched out their hands to touch the sparkling golden floor tiles, ignoring the fact that the monarch had failed to reprimand them. My Dao ancestor above, why are these floor tiles so hot? These floor tiles are actually as warm as jade? What's going on? Tai Chongqing Wang Ying was even more dumbfounded. The warm sensation coming from the soles of his feet made him swallow back all his words. Li Wangyu cast a glance at him, the corners of his mouth quirking. How is it, Duke Wang? Do you think these floor tiles will satisfy Duke Wang? If Duke Wang still feels that the cold is bone-piercing, then I can only recommend Duke Wang to the Shangyao Bureau to have your bones examined by Lu Fengyu. Wang Ying's old face flushed red, but he couldn't utter a single word of rebuttal. How could the aristocratic family officials help at this moment? They could only rejoice that they hadn't followed Wang Ying's lead and questioned the Duke of Qin. Otherwise, they would definitely be in the same predicament as Wang Ying, put on the spot by the Duke of Qin. Pai Lupi ignored Li Wangyu's taunting of Wang Ying, but he was also very curious. He couldn't help but ask, Zio, what kind of magic did you use? Why is it that not only are the floor tiles in this enormous Hanyuan Palace so warm, but the interior of the palace is also so comfortable, as if spring has returned to the earth? Pai Lupi's words reminded everyone. Only now did they notice that besides the floor tiles being as warm as jade, the temperature inside the hall was not as cold as outside. Everyone was wearing thick winter coats and furs. They even felt that their bodies were heating up in the hall. They wished that they could take off a few of their coats to feel lighter. Li Wangyu laughed and took off the thick fur coat on his body. Your Majesty, all of you, there is no need to wear such heavy clothing in the hall. The temperature in the hall is more than 10 degrees higher than the outside. Even if you don't wear winter clothes, you won't feel cold. Ever since Li Wangyu started teaching at the Royal Academy and invented the thermometer, the concept of temperature had been understood and accepted by everyone. Under the care of Mito, Pai Lupi also took off his thick winter coat and stretched his limbs. Ziyu, don't keep me in suspense. Quickly tell me, why is Hanyuan Palace so warm? We don't see any braziers in the hall, nor is there any smoke or fire. How did you do it? During the Tang Dynasty, people mainly relied on braziers and charcoal for warmth during the winter. The effect was not bad in a closed room, but the smell of smoke could not be avoided. Furthermore, for a palace as big as Hanyuan Palace, no matter how many braziers there were, it would not be warm. However, everyone could clearly see that the Hanyuan Palace in front of them did not have any braziers, nor was there any trace of smoke or fire. Li Wangyu lightly stomped on the floor tiles and explained with a smile, Your Majesty, when I was building the underground of Hanyuan Palace, I ordered the craftsmen to lay down many copper pipes. When winter comes, these copper pipes will be connected to the boilers and will continuously pour hot soup. This way, even if the outside wind is bone-chilling, the inside of the hall will be as warm as spring and there will not be any smoke or fire. I call it floor heating. To put it bluntly, it was the floor heating system of the later generations. The principle was not complicated. It used the heat radiation of hot water to heat the floor and the air in the hall. It was not a rare thing. However, during the Tang dynasty, this was an incredible invention. After listening to Li Wangyu's explanation, everyone, including Pai Lupi, squatted down and used their hands to feel the temperature of the floor. They looked like curious babies. Li Wangyu could not help but roll his eyes. Your Majesty, it is not only Hanyuan Palace that has floor heating. I have also arranged floor heating in several halls of the previous dynasty, as well as the future chambers of the harem, to ensure that Your Majesty will not be disturbed by the cold during the winter. Good. Good. Haha, I am now looking forward to the completion of Daming Palace as soon as possible so that I can move into the new palace with the retired emperor and Her Majesty the Empress. After staying in the warm Hanyuan Palace for half a day, Pai Lupi did not want to go out again. Pai Lupi rolled his eyes again and silently gave Pai Lupi a look to remind him not to forget today's business. As the emperor of the Tang dynasty, if he wanted to move into Daming Palace as soon as possible, it would depend on whether today's plan would succeed. Li Wangyu and Pai Lupi invited the officials of the imperial court, the rich merchants in Chang'an, and the Persian merchants to Daming Palace today not to show off, but to make money. To put it bluntly, this included Li Wangyu and Pai Lupi, as well as the dukes who had invested. Now that they had no money to expand half of Chang'an and the Daming Palace in Noda, even if Li Wangyu repeatedly cut corners, it would still cost a lot. Just expanding the walls of Chang'an alone would cost a lot, not to mention the building of the previous dynasty of Daming Palace. If they wanted to continue building the harem of Daming Palace, then sorry, the landlord did not have any extra money. In the end, he and Pai Lupi invited everyone to visit the previous dynasty of Daming Palace to sell the house to get money back. Pai Lupi understood Li Wangyu's hint and could not help blushing. But he still coughed softly and asked, Zio, you really deserve to be the core disciple of Taoist ancestor in the mortal world. I am very satisfied with Daming Palace. But that day in the imperial court, you promised me and the officials that you would not only build Daming Palace but also expand half of Chang'an. How is the new city in the north of the city now? Following Pai Lupi's words, Feng Xianling also stood up and said, Your Majesty, you are absolutely right. After this old subject has seen the great Ming Palace, I also admire it greatly. Zio, I wonder if you can sell me a mansion after the expansion in the north of the city? Now my mansion is next to Taiji Palace. It is humid in summer and cold in winter. It is really not a good place to live. Since Your Majesty will move to Daming Palace in the future, I also want to move to the new city to accompany Your Majesty. Feng Xuanling's words made everyone's heart skip a beat. But as he said, even Pai Lupi felt that Taiji Palace was not a good place to live, let alone these officials and businessmen. But they had no choice, so they could only choose to live in the square near Taiji Palace in the north of the city. After all, it was not only a symbol of identity, but also a reflection of status. If Pai Lupi moved to Daming Palace in the north of the city in the future, they would continue to live in the square where they originally lived. If they moved to Daming Palace in the north of the city, it would be better. Li Wangyu secretly gave them a thumbs up. They were really experienced actors. Their acting skills were really good. If there was an Oscar in the Tang dynasty including Pai Lupi, they should be awarded the Best Actor Oscar. After the two agents spoke, Li Wangyu immediately said with a smile, Your Majesty, Mr. Feng, now the outer wall of the new city in the north of the city has been completed. The roads and walls in the city have also been built. If Mr. Feng is interested in moving to the new city, there will be no problem. But in the new city, I will not sell land but mansions directly. I wonder if Mr. Feng is interested? Oh, what do you mean? Tell us, Zio. Feng Xianling twisted his beard and asked with a smile. It was not that there was no real estate business in the Tang dynasty, but except for buying second-hand old mansions under normal circumstances after buying land, they would hire craftsmen to build their own mansions. Li Wangyu said that he would not sell land, but mansions directly, which aroused the curiosity of everyone. They could not help but stretch their ears, wanting to hear how he would explain. Chapter 1068. Li Wangyu cleared his throat and smiled at the crowd. It was a very professional smile. Gentlemen, the new city in the north of Chang'an is completely different. Li Wangyu snapped his fingers and several servants immediately carried a huge sand table. On the sand table there was a model of the new city in the north of Chang'an, including the Daming Palace. Everyone, including Li Erzai, immediately gathered around the sand table and carefully looked at the sand table with shining eyes. Your Majesty, gentlemen, this is what the new city in the north of Chang'an will look like after it is completed. Li Wangyu took out a slender wooden stick from nowhere and began to explain the new city in the north of Chang'an, like a saleswoman in the future. As you can see, this is the Daming Palace under construction. In the future, the Daming Palace will be the core of the new city in the north of the city. In history, the Daming Palace was located in the Dragon Head Plain in the north of Chang'an. The Dragon Head Plain was a mountain that symbolized the dragon vein. It was 60 miles north from Fanchuan in the southwest of Chang'an. Because of the high terrain, it was called the Dragon Head Plain. However, Li Wangyu made a slight adjustment. It was changed from the dragon head to the dragon belly, and became the center of the north of the new city in the north of Chang'an. It was facing the Taiji Palace in the south. His purpose was very simple. Naturally, he wanted to increase the land price of the new city in the north of the city near the Daming Palace. If the Daming Palace was located in a corner, it would not be able to maximize its value. Of course, when Li Wangyu first proposed this plan, many people opposed it. Because from the perspective of feng shui, the Dragon Head Plain was the terrain of 6 lines in the Book of Changes. Building a new palace here followed the rules of etiquette. However, Li Wangyu was too lazy to care about this. With his relationship with Yuan Tiangang and his glib tongue, he easily settled this little trouble and made Pai Lupi agree to build the Daming Palace in the center of the new city in the north of Chang'an. Gentlemen, please take a look. Not only are there no dirty and smelly drainage canals on both sides of the road in Chang'an City, but the entire road is planted with towering trees and flowers. There are also pavilions on both sides of the road for pedestrians to rest. Sirs, take a look at the streets of the new city. Not only are all the streets paved with mirage mud, there are also street lamps on both sides of the streets to provide illumination at night. Even on a moonless and windy night, you can still see the streets clearly without a lantern. Fang Xianling looked interested and asked, Zio, there are no canals on both sides of the roads in the new city. If it rains, won't the roads be flooded? That's not true. Master Fang, underneath the new city's roads, as well as inside the various alleys, there are already sewage pipes. No matter how heavy the rain is, I can guarantee that no matter if it is the houses or the houses, they will not be soaked by the dirty water. Furthermore, Li Wangyu looked around at everyone and said with a smile, it's not just the rain. You don't have to worry about the 5 grains reincarnation cycle in the various mansions in the new city. Those filthy things will all pass through the new city's underground sewage pipes and be disposed of outside the city. If all of you are here, you don't have to worry about the indecent things in the toilets. Hey, I'm not bragging. As long as all of you have seen the toilets in the new city's mansions, you will definitely think that the toilets in Chang'an City are unsightly and filthy. He looked at Pai Lupi again and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, I also ordered people to build all the toilets in the Daming Palace like this. Pai Lupi nodded slightly. He was naturally aware of this. Pai Lupi had long been envious of the toilets and the huge bathroom in Li Wangyu's mansion. He had specifically requested this from Li Wangyu for the construction of the Daming Palace. Li Wangyu looked at everyone again and said with a smile, Sirs, in order to make it easier for all of you to go to court, there are also toilets for the officials at the side of Hanyuan Hall. If all of you need it, you can try it now. Everyone could not help but look at each other when they heard this. They had seen people treat people to a meal, but they had never seen people invite people to go to the toilet. However, everyone was curious about what Li Wangyu said just now. After all, only a few officials had been to Li Wangyu's mansion of King Qin. However, all of them had heard about how incredible the toilets in King Qin's mansion were. The mirror-like ceramic tiles, the inconceivable toilet bowl, the delightful fragrance of incense, to the unbearably smelly toilets of the Great Tang. All of these were undoubtedly very attractive. However, the officials still wanted to save face. Even if they were tempted, no one was willing to be the first to try it. As for the merchants and barbarian merchants, they were not qualified to enter the palace or attend court. Today, they were inexplicably invited by the king of Qin to view the new palace. If they missed this opportunity, they did not know if they would have another chance to enter the Daming Palace in this lifetime. Therefore, they did not care so much and stepped out without hesitation. After apologizing to Pai Lupi and Li Wangyu, they were led to the toilets by the eunuchs. With these merchants taking the lead, the officials stammered and stepped out. After apologizing, they also went to visit the toilets. Li Wangyu and Pai Lupi secretly looked at each other and smiled. They were very satisfied with everyone's reaction. After bringing the officials and merchants to visit the toilets of Hanyuan Palace, Li Wangyu continued to say, "Everyone, in addition to the new city's mansions, this type of toilets will be built together. It will also be like Hanyuan Palace, where floor heating will be installed. In addition, I don't know if you have noticed the copper pipes that come out of the toilets of Hanyuan Palace by themselves?" Li Wangyu's words made everyone nod in agreement. They were full of excitement. Just now, they had also noticed that after using the toilets of Hanyuan Palace, the eunuchs led everyone to a row of copper pipes. Below each copper pipe was a pure white ceramic basin. In front of each copper pipe was a large clear mirror. Although everyone did not understand, they felt that it was indescribably expensive. After all, this kind of glass mirror was sold on the market today. Its value was not low. Even among the officials, many of them were embarrassingly short of money and could not afford it. The toilets of Hanyuan Palace were actually installed with many glass mirrors. How could they not be surprised? But what made them even more surprised was that after the eunuchs fiddled with the copper pipes, clear water came out of them by themselves. Under the eunuch's instructions, everyone blankly washed their hands under the copper pipes. But they could not understand why these copper pipes would come out of the water by themselves. Many people even stubbornly believed that this was the magic that King Qin had used. Hearing Li Wangyu mention this again, everyone stretched their ears to listen. "Everyone, I call these copper pipes tap water. This will also be the standard configuration for mansions in the new city. It is also because of this that the mansions in the new city cannot be built by the various families themselves. Therefore, all the mansions in the new city will be built together and sold." Modern toilets, heating systems, and tap water were all selling points that Li Wangyu used to entice his customers. Otherwise, how could he sell the mansions in the new city at such a high price and make such a huge profit? These were very common things in the future, but in the ears of the Tang people they were incredible. Without waiting for the officials to speak, a Hu merchant stood out from the crowd and bowed. "Dare I ask King Qin if we can purchase the mansions in the new city?" The person who spoke was no stranger to Li Wangyu. It was the Hu merchant who had spent 20,000 taels of gold to purchase the eternal mirror of Qin at the auction. Li Wangyu wanted nothing more than to hug and kiss this cute Hu merchant. Tactful, truly too tactful. Chapter 1069. Li Wangyu had also arranged for Qiu Yuanliang from the Qiu family in Chang'an. However, since this Hu merchant was so supportive, he naturally did not need Qiu Yuanliang to do it. Li Wangyu smiled and nodded. Of course, the new city in the north of Chang'an and has a total of 36 square blocks. As long as you are willing to buy, you can move here. There are no restrictions. May I ask the king of Qin, what are the rules for a mansion in the new city? How much is the price? The Hu merchant continued to ask. The mansions in the new city are custom-made, which means that according to your needs, different mansions will be customized. Well, other than not exceeding the regulations, the price will be based on the needs of the area and the mansion. There will be different levels of price. Li Wangyu gestured to the eunuch again. Immediately, another eunuch took out a scroll and unfurled it. It was a map of the new city. The difference was that different blocks were marked with different colors. Everyone was puzzled and looked at Li Wangyu. Everyone, according to the colors red, orange, white, green, blue, blue and purple, the prices will be different in different blocks. The most expensive is purple and the cheapest is red. In the purple area, the base price of a mansion is 1,000 taels of gold per mu. In the red area, it is 500 taels of gold per mu. In addition, the prices of the mansions are different according to the level of construction. There are 3 types of mansions to choose from: the normal version, the comfortable version, and the luxurious version. Other than the normal version, the comfortable version requires an additional 100 taels of gold per mu. The luxurious version requires an additional 200 taels of gold per mu. After Li Wangyu reported the price, everyone was in an uproar. They expected the mansions in the new city to be expensive, but they did not expect it to be so expensive. What ordinary, comfortable, and luxurious versions of the mansion? They didn't understand what exactly they meant. However, just by looking at the price, everyone understood that the decorations and materials in the mansions were probably different. As long as these officials were not so poor that they needed to use their pants, they would not choose the normal version of the mansion. Otherwise, it would be too degrading. If they followed the King of Qin's words and customized the comfortable version of the mansion, they would have to add another 100 taels of gold per mu. This was not selling a mansion, it was robbing money. The mansions in the Tang dynasty were not the commercial houses of the future. The area was not calculated in square meters but in mu. In the city of Chang'an, a lane had an area of about 800 acres. Not just the mansions of nobles, but they could occupy half of the square. That would be 300 to 400 mu in size. Even an ordinary house would be around 10 to 20 mu. According to Li Wangyu's price, even the most ordinary residence in the most remote district of the new city would cost 500 taels of gold per mu. Didn't that mean that even the most ordinary residence would cost 10,000 taels of gold? How was this possible? How could there be such an expensive house in the world? They wouldn't be able to afford such an expensive mansion even if they sold it. Li Wangyu didn't wait for the crowd to protest. He continued, however, His Majesty is benevolent, and I am also very generous. Therefore, if you are willing to place a deposit today, then I will give you a special discount. You will have a 10% discount. A house worth 10,000 taels of gold could be bought for 1,000 taels of gold. Everyone, such a good thing can only happen today. Everyone, please don't miss out on it. Li Wangyu was like the boss of a Tuyuan store in the future. He shouted directly without any sense of shame. He almost said, His Majesty has run away with his aunt, so all the mansions will be sold at a 10% discount. If his words were heard by Su Chongqing, he would probably cover his face with one hand and be too ashamed to face anyone. But for the officials and businessmen, the effect was surprisingly good. Selling mansions at a 10% discount? Compared with the original sky-high price of mansions in the new city, the crowd silently calculated in their hearts. It seemed to be very good. They forgot that even if it was only a 10% discount, the price was more than 10 times the price of a mansion in Chang'an. Pai Lupi and Li Wangyu, as well as Fang Xianling and the others in the line of officials, secretly looked at each other, their eyes full of smiles. Li Wangyu had demanded an exorbitant price. Naturally, it was impossible for him to accept it. In the world, except for the Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou and Shenzhen of the future, there was no such expensive house. The so-called original price was just a gimmick that Li Wangyu came up with to make the officials and businessmen accept the house price that was 10 times higher than the market price. However, although the crowd was tempted, no one stood out to say anything. After all, the current price was still painful for the crowd. They were all wondering whether it was worth it to spend such a high price to buy a mansion in the new city. Honorable Qin King, if possible, I would like to buy a mansion next to the Daming Palace. While the crowd was hesitating, the Hu merchant who had inquired before stood out again. He pointed to the most expensive mansion next to the Daming Palace, which was marked purple. He said, I would like to buy a mansion of 100 acres in size in this square. I would like to customize a luxurious mansion. Is that possible? When the officials saw this, their noses were almost crooked from anger. Damn, these Hu merchants were indeed rich. They actually wanted to buy the best location and the best mansion. Some people silently calculated in their hearts. According to Li Wangyu's price just now, the mansion that the Hu merchant wanted would cost 12,000 taels of gold, which was 76,000 strings of coins. Immediately, someone felt as if a jar of vinegar had been knocked over and stepped out to stop him. Your Majesty, I don't think this is appropriate. How can a merchant's mansion be placed outside the Daming Palace? This is against the rules of etiquette. Li Wangyu glared at him. Nonsense, what's against the rules of etiquette? Which law of the Tang dynasty says that merchants can't live in the square outside the palace? This. The official who spoke wanted to say that this was the rule, but for a long time he didn't know how to argue. Originally, in Chang'an, the square in the north of the city on both sides of the Taiji Palace was where the officials lived. Most of the merchants lived near the east and west of the city. This was an unwritten rule. But if one really wanted to talk about it, the Tang dynasty really didn't have a law that said that merchants couldn't live in the square outside the palace. Pai Lupi also laughed. No matter, whether it's a merchant or an official, they are all my subjects. As long as they abide by the laws of the Tang dynasty, there's no harm in living in any square. Pai Lupi only wanted to laugh in his heart. If a mansion of 100 mu could be sold for more than 10,000 taels of gold, then how much could this new Chang'an city in Noda be sold for? Pai Lupi, who had long been dazzled by the copper coins, didn't care about the stupid rule of where merchants could live. As long as they were willing to spend money, then nothing was forbidden. Pai Lupi didn't care in the slightest whether the people living in the square outside the Daming Palace were merchants or officials. With Pai Lupi's endorsement, the merchants couldn't help but look at each other with excitement. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this one also wants to buy a mansion in the new city. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this one wants to buy a mansion of 80 mu in this square. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this one also wants to buy a mansion. The merchants of the Tang dynasty didn't lack gold and copper coins in their pockets at all. What they needed was status. Now that Pai Lupi had opened his mouth and allowed them to buy a mansion in the square outside the Daming Palace, what was there to hesitate about? For a moment, a group of wealthy merchants and barbarian merchants no longer cared about the price. They all spoke up and asked to buy a house in the square next to the Daming Palace. This group of merchants who didn't lack money all chose the most expensive square. Feng Xianling and the other dukes didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. They twirled their beards and smiled. Naturally, they didn't need to be in a hurry. As one of the shareholders, the group of dukes had already reserved the best land for their families to build a mansion in. However, the aristocratic families led by the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were anxious at this time. Although they disliked Li Wangyu for being too greedy, and the price of a mansion in the new city too high, they couldn't remain silent when they saw the barbarians rush to buy. If these barbarians were allowed to seize the best square in the new city, the aristocratic families would lose all face. They couldn't let the merchants live next to the Taiji Palace after the new city was built, and the aristocratic families were pushed to the side, right? No matter how expensive a mansion in the new city was, they could only grit their teeth and accept it now. Wait, Duke of Qin, there must be a way to buy a mansion in the new city. How can we let these merchants do as they please? Grand Chancellor Wang Ying immediately stood up and acted as the representative of the aristocratic families. Li Wangyu didn't get angry and said with a grin, "You're right, Duke Wang. Then let's let you all choose first. After you're done, the merchants can choose." Although the merchants were dissatisfied, they had no choice but to nod in agreement. Although they were rich, their status and officials were far from that of the aristocratic families. Although they were dissatisfied, they didn't dare to act rashly. There were many officials in the imperial court who didn't have enough money, and there were even more who couldn't afford a mansion in the new city. Even if they wanted to buy one, most of them could only choose to live in the cheaper square in the new city. Therefore, even though Wang Ying had said so in the end, other than the aristocratic families led by the 5 surnames and 7 hopes, most of the officials who were determined to move their mansions to the new city didn't choose the square near the Daming Palace. Even so, Pai Lupi's eyes grew brighter and brighter. In just a short while, 50 to 60% of the land in the new city of Chang'an had been reserved. He did a rough calculation, and even his breathing became heavy. The imperial treasury that seemed to be almost empty would immediately become plentiful. Moreover, it seemed that he would need to expand the treasury to store gold and copper coins. Not to mention that Li Er's eyes were now filled with stars as he secretly calculated how much money he had earned. That old man Wang Ying stood out again. "King of Qin, may I know when we can move into the mansion in the new city?" The old man also felt the pinch. He had spent so much money to buy the mansion, so naturally, he wanted to move in immediately. Now that the weather was cold, if he could spend the winter in a mansion with floor heating, it seemed that the money spent would be worth it. His old arms and legs were the most vulnerable to the cold. Now that Hanyuan Palace was so warm, the old man was reluctant to leave. Therefore, he looked forward to moving into a new mansion. Li Wangyu laughed again. "Don't worry, Lord Wang. The new mansion in the north of the city hasn't been built yet. After you have paid, it will be delivered to you in about half a year." What? Half a year? Wang Ying heard and was instantly furious. King of Qin, how can this be? We haven't even seen the mansion and we have to pay. How can this be? Haha. This is called prepayment. Otherwise, why would we only charge a 10% discount for today's sale? This is the reason. Of course, if Lord Wang feels that it is inappropriate, you don't have to pay. You can buy it after the mansion is built. But when the time comes, it will not be this price. Lord Wang will have to buy it at the original price. Li Wangyu was very indifferent. His mind was thinking about the house he had just bought when he first transmigrated. Damn it! Advance housing? Advance housing your sister. Just by looking at the blueprint, he had to pay the down payment, get a bank loan, and start paying the monthly allowance. How could this be reasonable? Until Li Wangyu transmigrated, the house he bought had not been completed. Every time he thought about it, he felt depressed. But now, he understood that if he wanted to make money, he had to do this. Just like the development of the new city in the north of Chang'an and the new Daming Palace. Even if he, Pai Lupi, and the other dukes threw in all their money, they could only build half of the Daming Palace. As for the new city in Chang'an, there was nothing except for the city walls and walls. It was just a piece of wasteland. If they did not sell the prepayment houses and took the money from the aristocratic families, officials, and merchants, how could they continue to develop it? To put it bluntly, Li Wangyu, Pai Lupi, and the others were just trying to gain something without risking anything. Li Wangyu's words immediately made Wang Ying speechless for a long time. The old man was so angry that his face was like a tidal wave, but he did not know how to refute Li Wangyu's words. The officials, merchants, and barbarian merchants all looked at each other. They felt that today was an eye-opener. Could a mansion be sold like this? Everyone felt that Li Wangyu, the Prince of Qin, was really shameless. He actually took a piece of empty land and wanted to collect money. It was really too shameless. But when they thought about it again, the discount price was still the same as the original price. Everyone stopped talking. It seemed that there was some truth in it. Li Wangyu, on the other hand, felt at ease being the unscrupulous merchant that he hated the most. He continued to swindle them. Everyone, today I am being generous because of His Majesty. The price of 10% is the cost price. Everyone, please don't think that it is expensive. Let's not talk about other things, just the floor heating alone uses copper pipes. What's the difference between using copper to lay the floor and using money to lay the floor? For such a mansion, do you think that the current price is still expensive? In fact, he was just trying to change the concept. It was indeed expensive to lay the floor heating system with copper pipes. However, not all rooms in the mansion were equipped with a floor heating system. Most of the areas in the mansion of about 100 mu were gardens and ponds. It would not cost much at all. How many rooms were there that could be lined with copper pipes? But copper was money now. The officials and merchants also felt that what he said was right and nodded. In the end, under the unscrupulous merchant Li Wangyu's stubborn refusal to lower the price, everyone had no choice but to accept the hooligan clause of pre-sale houses. They all signed the purchase contract under the witness of Pai Lupi. The officials and merchants ended their one-day tour of Daming Palace with complicated feelings. Pai Lupi, Li Wangyu, and the others, on the other hand, were secretly delighted. As expected, it was most interesting to build one's happiness on the pain of others. Time flew by. It was the end of the 8th year of Zhengguan's reign. Hu County, Dingzhou Village, Duke of Qin's mansion. Today, the mansion was unusually lively with guests as many as the clouds. The reason was very simple. The Duke of Qin's concubine, that Hu concubine named Aphrodite, had given birth to a concubine's daughter a few days ago. Today, the Duke of Qin was holding a banquet to celebrate his daughter's 1-month-old birthday. In the banquet hall of the Duke of Qin's mansion in Noda, 3 rounds of wine had passed and the atmosphere was at its peak. Chang Yaojin, who had already returned from the western regions, was drinking until his face and ears were red. He slapped Li Wangyu's shoulder and said, "Kid, tell me today why my Duke of Lu's mansion had no part in the construction of the new Chang'an city last year." Now that a year had passed, Daming Palace had long been completed. Pai Lupi and Li Yuan had already moved to the new palace. The northern part of Chang'an city had also been expanded. A large number of officials, nobles, and merchants had also moved there, forming the new Chang'an city center. Within the new city, Li Wangyu did not forget to build a residence for Chang Yaojin. However, this old fellow was not satisfied. He felt that Li Wangyu had committed a crime for not pulling him into the investment. Because of this old fellow had been teaching Li Wangyu a lesson every time he returned to Chang'an. At today's banquet, Chang Yaojin, this old fellow, had drunk a few cups of high alcohol before he grabbed Li Wangyu and began to denounce him. Li Wangyu silently rolled his eyes. He was too lazy to pay attention to him. At that time, Pai Lupi had led a group of duke guas to his residence. After forcing him to clearly explain his plan, he had forcibly asked for a share of the spoils. Li Wangyu had no choice but to agree, but he did not forget Chang Yaojin. However, at that time Chang Yaojin was far away in the western regions. Chang Chumo and the other two idiots even mocked Li Wangyu for throwing money into the water. Under such circumstances the uncle could endure, but the aunt could not. Of course Li Wangyu was too lazy to pay attention to those three idiots. Since he had invested, he did not pay attention to the Duke of Lu's mansion. As a result, when Chang Yaojin came back, he always made trouble for him with this matter. Li Wangyu was really speechless. Actually, it was not that Chang Yaojin lacked money. Although the Duke of Lu's mansion did not get to eat meat with Li Wangyu this time, they had already made a lot of money from the lime mines in Hu County. This old fellow deliberately used this topic to bully Li Wangyu every time, making him very depressed. Li Wangyu was too lazy to say anything more to this shameless old hooligan. He simply used the opportunity of the toast to hide next to Pai Lupi. No matter how shameless Chang Yaojin was, he still had to restrain himself in front of Pai Lupi. However, Li Wangyu did not expect that after escaping the old hooligan's evil clutches with great difficulty, before he could catch his breath, Pai Lupi next to him lightly threw a few words at him. He was so scared that the white hairs on his back were soaked with sweat. Zio, why is it that even your Chang'an is pregnant and has given birth to a concubine's daughter? Why is there still no news from my Chang'an? Do you have some dissatisfaction with me and Chang'an? F***ck Pai Lupi, are you crazy? Li Wangyu looked at Pai Lupi flabbergasted. He really did not know how to respond. Although Chang'an had inexplicably married him, he had not touched the little loli at all. How could she be pregnant? Li Wangyu was not a psychopath. He also had his beautiful superior and his two concubines, Aphrodite and Perrin. No matter how much of a hooligan he was, he would not have any ideas about a teenage loli. He remembered that when this shameless bearded man in front of him married his wife, she was only 11 or 12 years old. What a beast! Li Wangyu silently cursed in his heart, but he could only bow to Pai Lupi with a bitter face. Your Majesty, please do not make trouble. Chang'an is still young. Without waiting for him to finish, Pai Lupi directly interrupted him. Don't try to fool me with this nonsense. I warn you, if other women in your residence are pregnant before Chang'an is pregnant, be careful that I will directly take you down from the throne and punish you. Li Wangyu was shocked by these words and was tongue-tied. **ck. There was such a shameless person. Why did God not strike him to death with lightning? Li Wangyu was forced to flee by the shameless Lord Tai Shan. He became more and more suspicious. Was he deliberately playing with him when he was thrown to the Tang dynasty by God? None of the monarchs and ministers of the Tang dynasty were good people. End of book. The book, The Dissolute Little Landlord of the Tang Dynasty, was written from the Spring Festival of 1919 to the present. It had been almost 2 years and more than 2 million words. He was very reluctant to end it, but people always had to bow to reality. His grades were poor and he wanted to end it several times. At the 800th chapter, he was almost ready to end it, but he was still reluctant and continued with gritted teeth. But even if he was unwilling, there was still a time to say goodbye. He finished it very hastily. He wrote at most half of the plot in the outline plan, but he really could not persist. He did not update for 2 days before finishing the book. After hesitating again and again, he could only apologize to those who had always supported Lao Long, tidying up his mood and summing up his experience. He hoped that the next book would be a good result. The new book is a reborn urban novel. It will be signed and released soon. Those who like Lao Long's books can come and read it at that time. That's it. Everyone, goodbye.